I'm Hilary Hendershot, your host, and this is Profit Boss Radio, episode 113. Profit Boss Radio is your weekly wealth mastermind. Profit Boss is also a community and a movement for women who are ready to take control of their money, break the glass ceiling, and give ourselves permission to finally have enough. Want the secrets of wealth to be yours? This is the place. I'm Hilary Hendershot. I'm a certified financial planner running a leading advisory firm for women, and I'm sharing with you real stories from real life and real women who are making it happen. Forget Wall Street. Let's do this, ladies. Welcome, Profit Boss. Today we're speaking to Steve Siebold. He's a former professional athlete and national coach. He spent the past 32 years studying the thought processes, habits, and philosophies of world-class performers. Today he helps Fortune 500 companies increase sales, develop people, and manage change through mental toughness and critical thinking. His clients include Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, Caterpillar, U.S. Navy SEALs, and the Boston Celtics. He's written 10 books on mental toughness that have sold over 500,000 copies. His new book, Secrets Self-Made Millionaires Teach Their Kids, has become a bestseller. Steve is a regular on Fox Business Network and has been featured on the Today Show, Good Morning America, BBC in Europe, NBC Australia, CCTV China, and hundreds of others throughout the world. He's quoted regularly in the Wall Street Journal, Fortune, and Forbes magazines. Steve, welcome to Profit Boss Radio.
Hi, thanks, Hilary. Thanks for having me.
You don't know this, but I've actually been quoting you for years. I quote you in almost every time I speak publicly because you have provided some of the only data about wealth and wealthy people and wealth mindsets that I've come across. So your name is well known to me. So thanks for that.
Oh, thank you.
And when I got this book, Secrets Self-Made Millionaires Teach Their Kids, I thought that it was going to be about how to, and especially there's a picture of you on the front with your wife and your lovely children. I thought this is going to be how Steve taught his kids about money. But it isn't really that. It isn't basic personal finance lessons. This is more of a wealth memoir or a wealth treatise, if you will. Is that how you describe it?
Well, yeah, first of all, it's not my family on the front. I don't have any kids. And that's not me on the front. I'm on the back. It's the back cover of the book being interviewed.
Is that the guy who wrote the prologue?
No, yes, it is. Bo Gibbs.
Bo Gibbs.
From Atlanta. Yeah. Yeah, it's a rental family. But they're nice people, very nice people. And they have a lot of money, too. They're rich.
Yeah, he did say that in the prologue. He said he was rich.
Yeah, self-made. Yeah, they're self-made millionaires here in Atlanta and friends of ours and whatnot. So, yeah, since I don't have any kids, we had to rent them.
Was that it? The publisher just said, we need a family on the front of this book, Steve.
Yeah, we need to rent some kids. You don't have any kids. I said, let's rent them. How much can it be? So that's what we did.
Okay, point taken. Well, good. Okay, so how would you then? What inspired the book? What do you think encapsulates what this book is?
Well, in 1984, I started interviewing. I was a broke college student. I was in my sophomore year, and I had grown up around rich kids. I was not a rich kid, but I grew up on the national junior tennis circuit, competing all around the world as a child, kind of tennis prodigy, and a lot of those kids are rich. And so I saw how rich people lived, and so by the time I got to college in 1984, my sophomore year, I started interviewing people who were self-made millionaires. And one of the questions I asked them during the interviews was, "What do you teach your children that people that are not rich, don't?" And so I asked that question, and I've been doing those interviews since 1984. As a matter of fact, I just interviewed at our facility here in Atlanta. We just interviewed number 1,306, I think it was, last week. And so I've done over 1,300 interviews with self-made millionaires since 1984. And that's always been one of the questions. What do you teach your kids as a self-made millionaire? And this book is a result of all those answers.
So it's in bite-sized lessons. It's actually 319 pages, but it's 160 chapters or lessons. And it's all actually based on entrepreneurship. It basically is about how to become a self-made millionaire, how to make self-made wealth by running businesses, starting and running businesses. Yes?
Yeah, it's the psychology, the psychological part, because, when you interview rich people for 30 years, you start to realize after about the first 10 years, I started to realize that this is a mental game. This is not really about money. Finances, at the basic level, finance is pretty easy. It's just basic math. Now you're talking about creating derivative financial products. Okay, that's genius stuff, but that's beyond the scope of most people, including me. But basic finance, you can teach a high school kid. So it turns out that getting wealthy, at least in my experience and through my research, it's more psychological. It's 90% mental and 10% financial.
Right. And I think that some people get stuck in thinking, well, I wasn't born with natural advantages. I am not the smartest kid in the class. I get C pluses and B minuses, but that really isn't, I mean, certainly being smart probably doesn't hurt, although I think for some people actually it does get in their way. And that's really what you discovered and have been talking about for many years, which is what I picked up on and why I've been quoting you, is that what you just said, it's more a mental game than an advantage game or an opportunity game or a smarts game, right?
Oh, you're totally right. I mean, most of the 1,300 self-made millionaires, including the ones I've just interviewed in the last 2 months here at our place in Atlanta, are not any smarter than the average person. And, once in a while, I've interviewed a few people that were just really, really like an Elon Musk type of person that are just, just very, very gifted. But they're far and few between. I mean, it's a tiny, tiny percentage. Most of them are just focused on money. They learn the psychology of money. They learn a little bit about basic finance. And then they're smart with their money. But most of it is overcoming the psychological barriers that hold most of us back.
I just thought of this question. I didn't pre-plan it, but let me throw this out there. Of the 13, did you say it's 1,308 million?
1,307, I think we did last Friday. Yeah.
Okay. Of that, what do you think is the breakdown between men and women?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't think there really is. We've interviewed probably in the last 6 months, probably 25 female entrepreneur multimillionaires, and most of them under the age of 40, interestingly enough. And I think that maybe sometimes the only thing that I think women have a harder time sometimes, this is just based on a bunch of, doing all these interviews, just because sometimes I think they feel guilt going out, which is not, they shouldn't, of course, but the society kind of puts that on them sometimes. I think women have a much tougher time with that because society just puts that on them like, hey, you got to have this perfect family and these perfect kids and take care of your husband or your spouse. And oh, by the way, make sure that, you're very successful on the outside. So you got to kind of do both. Where the guys get off the hook. If they let their wives take care of the kids and do all the household stuff while they're out there building their business. So I think it's tougher on women psychologically and emotionally. Yeah.
Anecdotally, of the 25 women that you've interviewed recently, how do they handle that? Do they not have families, or are they in a sort of what's the mom? Is the dad playing the mom role, or how are they working that out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I asked all of them that, and it varies. Like in one of them, the woman is in the financial services industry out in California. And her husband was an engineer. So she retired her husband, and he takes care of all the household stuff. He works with the kids. They have little kids. And she runs the business on the outside. And so they kind of swapped roles, and it works really well. They've been doing it for 20 years, and it works real well for them. And then other people bring people in to help, the sort of the nanny support and that type of thing. And some of them work out of their homes, so they don't really have that much of an issue. Right. But they do tend to bear more of an emotional burden. Again, I think society probably has improperly, and inappropriately placed on them.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into the book a little bit. I picked it up it actually arrived in the mail to me on the Monday before I was hosting a full day mastermind. So I'm coaching, I have a program called the 50K Wealth Multiplier Experience. I'm coaching 11 women who get together 3 times in person over the course of the program. And I'm a big believer in that the universe provides for me what I need to do what I'm doing. And this book showed up, and it just was speaking to me. I couldn't put it down. And I thought, oh, obviously we're supposed to mastermind from these lessons this weekend. So we did. We actually talked a lot about some of these chapters, and I bought them all a copy of the book and shipped it to them. So I want to start with chapter 1, which some people are going to have a hard time with the title of this chapter. Rich people rule the world.
Yeah.
Talk
a little feedback on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we like to think that virtues and principles can maybe rule the day, but talk a little bit about rich people rule the world.
Yeah, kind of funny. MSNBC didn't really like it at all, but CNBC loved it. It's funny how
interesting.
Loved it. Wall Street Journal loved it, but some of the other outlets did not appreciate it. Yeah, we've always been told, well, love makes the world go round. Well, it doesn't. Unfortunately, it'd be nice if it did, but it's a ridiculous notion. Money makes the world go round. I'm not saying it should be like that, but it is like that. And I think if you're going to be self-made rich, you have to wake up to objective reality. It's one of the things that is tough for all of us, I think, to that live in sort of this idyllic world that we create for ourselves, or society creates, that says, hey, love makes the world go round, and the world's a beautiful place, and all those things. And the truth is, money makes the world go round, and it's very easy to prove. So if you're operating in objective reality, and you're operating in a way that you understand the way the world actually works, as opposed to the way we wish it worked, you have a much better chance for financial success.
Well, I think it comes down to, we've created an economic system where we don't barter, we trade for money. You trade me something, some product or service, and I give you money in exchange. So literally, you're accurate. Money moves the world. I say sales moves the world. Salespeople make the world go round, right? Sure. Without the sales force of all the corporations around the world, very little would happen. So I think that once you kind of swallow that tough pill, because we all have idealistic wants, I agree with you. In objective reality, money makes the world go round. And then in stark contrast, the next chapter is fall in love with work. You say it's wonderful to be rich, but the real windfall is becoming wealthy doing something you would do for free. And do you find that to be consistent with the self-made millionaires you've interviewed?
Probably the number one piece of advice they've given me in the interviews over the 32 years or 34 years now, actually, is that one thing: fall in love with what you do for a living, and you'll never really have to go to work. I mean, you're going to work, but you'll absolutely love it. And that was one of the best pieces of advice, I've ever gotten. That from probably most people that have done well have gotten, because you're going to have to work a lot harder than, a lot longer than most people to gain financial advantage, especially in the beginning. And if you hate it, it's not. I had a business at one time which I was making millions and millions of dollars a year, and I didn't like it at all, and I felt like I was poor. Even though I was rich financially, I really honestly felt poor. I felt sorry for myself that I was in that business. It's the craziest thing in the world. I never figured that would happen, but they were right. You should love what you do. That's
terrible. And I think that speaks directly to something you said in the intro, which is, you're going to have to, you said the entrepreneurs you've interviewed have really got interested in money. They're very focused on money. And I think some listeners are going to say, oh, I don't want to be focused on money. I want to be focused on my family or my friends, or, but then to contrast that, you said, you can, if you fall in love with work, you're never going to feel like you're going to work. It's almost like it's interesting because everyone's out there looking for their passion as if it's inside them somewhere. Like you could unzip your rib cage and look inside your soul and find your passion. But I think the real trick is to fall in love with what you're doing.
No question. I really do. Yeah. You fall in love with what you're doing. And if it's something you really don't like, get out of it. I mean, I walked away from a business, lost $10 million in stock because I just didn't like every day. I really didn't like what I was doing every day, or with the people, that I was doing it with. And so and that was a long time ago. That $10 million, God knows how much that would be worth today, but certainly a lot more. And if you ask me right now, was it worth it? It was worth $10 million. It was worth $50 million because really? I didn't waste any more of my life doing something I hated with people I didn't like.
And do you think that it's paid off? It certainly is obviously paid off in terms of you enjoying your life. Has it paid off for you financially? Do you feel like more doors are open to you? Is it a better life now?
Oh, it's so much better. And I made all the money back, which was good. But honestly, even if I wouldn't have made the money back, and I wasn't sure I ever would,
yeah.
I got lucky and I did, got some good breaks and whatnot. But even if I didn't, and I just made a decent living, Hilary, I'll tell you the truth, I would have taken that life over the life with all the money, but not wanting to get up in the morning and go to that kind of work.
Right. And then there's this point that you make sort of over and over again in the book. In you attack it in many different ways. It says, get rich solving problems. The masses solve small problems for their employers. The rich solve significant problems for society and get compensated accordingly. I thought that was profound.
Yeah, it's kind of profound in a way, and it's kind of simple in a way that, in a free market economy like like we have in the U.S., you get rich by solving a problem, and the bigger problem you solve, the richer you get. So if you're not making enough money, all you have to do is say, well, if I'm making, whatever amount, $50,000 a year, I'm probably solving a $50,000 a year problem, and if I'm making $100,000, I'm probably solving a $100,000 a year problem, and so on and so forth. So all you really have to do is solve a bigger problem.
Solve a bigger problem. Right.
It's really simple. Yeah.
Right. It's profound and simple at the same time. Can you, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but I do. So I would like to, if I can, tap into your knowledge of these millionaires. Can you think of a couple examples of times entrepreneurs described what they did, the problems that they actually solved, and you thought, wow, that's unique, or how profoundly simple, or I can't believe someone didn't see that before you, or wow, that's actually genius. Any unique problems that people are solving?
Most of the people I've interviewed, interestingly enough, were solving basic problems. One of the billionaires, I've interviewed a fair amount of billionaires over the years as well, and self-made billionaires, all self-made, no inherited people. Mm-hmm. I started interviewing inherited people, people that are wealthy, and 1/3 of the country, as you know, is inherited wealth, and 2/3 is self-made in the U.S. And I didn't know the difference in the 80s. So from 1984 to 1988, I had some inherited wealth. I interviewed some of the Johnson & Johnson heirs, for example. Yes. And I felt so sorry, Hilary, for those people. No kidding. They had, some of them, had billions of dollars, and they were 30 years old. They never worked another day. They never worked a day in their life. And I mean, they were some of the most miserable people. I felt like I wanted to call the suicide prevention line for these people. And
I've actually seen a documentary about that family. And
it's terrible. It's not just them. It's not just, some of those people, sure, but they all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're 20 years old and you're worth $5 billion. You never had to interact with people or get to know people or grow and personally, develop personally. You just sort of all this money is lumped on you, and you never earned anything. And it's like when people win the lottery, they don't feel like they deserve it, so they go gamble it away or drink it away or do whatever. So just the self-made rich. But going back to your original question about interesting things, most of the things are basic. Like Rich DeVos, the multi-billionaire who owns the Orlando Magic. What he told me was how one of the things we did was try to entertain people. People like to be the masses love to be entertained, and basketball entertains people, and they make a lot of money on that business, and they own others as well. But it's usually basic services. It's nothing usually too complicated. It's usually a lot of things that people don't know, no one else wants to do. Like Wayne Huizenga, for example. I interviewed him years ago, and he was the king of trash. Trash removal was his big claim to fame before he got into the automobile business.
Isn't trash removal a civil service?
Well, this is a big company called Republic, right, in Florida. Oh. Yeah, and so he owned the largest independent business that did this. So yeah, so for commercial, it's not.
Got it. I understand.
He became a billionaire doing that.
And that reminds me of I believe the wealthiest woman in China also does trash, right?
Was that right? I don't know that. Okay, that's probably true. Something no one else wants to do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And then I thought this was an interesting point. Government is not your friend. Study it and know what you're up against. Talk about that.
Oh, the government wants your money. Yeah. The one, probably the most understudied thing I think in America with people, the average citizen is taxation. If you don't understand taxation, the way it works, according to the new laws, especially with the new laws Trump is, putting across, and the 1986 tax laws, most people don't know how to leverage taxes and use them to your advantage instead of getting killed with them. Most employees, for example, are paying way too much. Yes, I know you know this, but most people don't. They're paying way too high a percentage in taxes, and they don't know it because they don't learn it in school. No one tells them to study taxation, and it's not rocket science unless you're writing tax laws, or tax code. You just have to understand the basics of it. So understand the government just wants to suck our money from us, and so they can keep growing government. And so we've got to defend ourselves against confiscatory, what is effectively confiscatory taxation, where they're confiscating what's technically ours And they're doing it by saying, here's at the point of a gun. So if they're going to do it at the point of a gun, which they do, they'll put you in jail if you don't pay your taxes. You've got to know how the system works. And it really isn't that complicated. It just takes go on YouTube. And, I suggest to people all the time, go on YouTube and just study videos, and you'll know a lot about it in a couple of months.
Most financial advisors think that unless you have $500,000 or maybe even $1 million or more to invest, you're actually more trouble than the time it takes to help you. I have a huge problem with that notion. You aren't a number. You're a person who has real financial goals, questions, and dreams. For those of you out there with less than $500,000 to invest, have you found yourself stuck with a financial advisor who only tries selling you insurance or annuities, where it's obvious that you're nothing more than a commission to them? Or how about a robo-advisor that offers no personalized attention? Wouldn't you love to find someone who actually cares about your financial success? Someone who wants to know why you're investing in the first place? Well, I have good news. Ignite Investing now offers you personalized financial planning and advice, a professionally constructed portfolio, financial accountability, and a custom wealth plan so that you can make the most of your money, as well as connect you inside a community of investors who are goal-oriented like you and who are committed to achieving financial freedom. If that sounds like what you've been looking for, then we'd love for you to apply by visiting igniteinvesting.com and clicking on Get Started today. When you say employees are paying too high of a tax rate, the way out of that is to become or have at least part of your life be self-employed. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the 1986 tax laws were created for that. You're probably too young to remember this, but I remember when Reagan, during the Reagan administration, when they created those tax laws, and basically they were all for the small business person, as you're saying, the self-employed, the entrepreneur. So if you're working at, Johnson & Johnson or Procter & Gamble or somewhere like that, or any company for that matter, you want to have a small business on the side. Even if you lose money every year, all you have to do is show what they call showing the intent to make a profit, even if you don't make a profit. And you can write off all the losses for 3 years, and instead of paying 35 or 40% effective tax, every year, you're going to be paying 15%.
Right.
And I've showed this to so many people. You've probably shown it to more people than I have. But I've talked about this all over the country, and people go, I've never heard of that before.
I do talk about it a lot, and it took courage for me to go out on my own as an entrepreneur. I went from being a wage earner in my father's financial planning firm to being on my own. But now that I'm here, man, I'll never go back. I just will never. It's just a completely different life, because much of what you do as the owner of a business is a tax deduction. It's just a completely different pricing level.
All the tax code is written for the small business in this country, because small business people employ more people than the big businesses do in this country. And I don't think most people realize that.
Right.
It's a big deal. Yeah.
Okay. And then here's chapter 66. The world wants to make you rich. Now, Steve, this flies in the face of, I know, the way a lot of people feel about money and wealth and the ability to start a profitable business. And it can feel hard. A lot of people have a strongly held belief you have to work hard for money. Talk a little bit about the world wants to make you rich.
Oh, there's no question about it. Make me feel good, entertain me, make me laugh, make me cry. I mean, do something. Give me something I want. I will gladly, make you rich. I mean, I think that's sort of the mindset of anyone, anywhere in the free market. I was thinking about the iPod the other day. I mean, we all made Steve Jobs really rich, and we're all happy about it. We have the iPhone, the iPod, and all the Apple products, and hey, I'm glad that he went out a multi-billionaire. It's fantastic because he made all our lives a lot better. All of us that like the iPhone and the iTunes and the iPad,
iTunes,
all of it, right? iTunes, all of them, right? The everything, life.
And Bill Gates, the most loved and hated character of the 1980s and 1990s, right? And yet he changed all of our lives. He did more good for the world than any philanthropist, right? He literally transformed he's the one who put a PC on every desktop.
He sure did.
Right.
Yeah. and he's almost single-handedly wiped out malaria in the world because we made him so rich that he was rich enough to donate, $40 billion in an effort to wipe out malaria worldwide. And he's almost done it single-handedly. Yeah. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, he's done some pretty amazing things.
It's entrepreneurs that do it. They're always the ones,
Okay. You make a point called family first. Put your family first. And there are many points Even though I would say this book is almost a love story about money and entrepreneurship, you also clearly, and about every third or fourth chapter, make the point of don't fall in love with money. Money isn't your self-worth. It's just your net worth. Dollars are just dollars. Put your family first. And I think that can be very hard for people as life starts to get busy. Time is our only real constraint. So do you have any tips for people, how to actually do that in reality?
Yeah, but see, I think that before you have, real money, money, enough money where you never have to think about it again. I think before you have that, I think a lot of people, because I get emails about that. I used to think the same thing because I didn't know any better either. But that when I have all this stuff, when I'm living in a mansion, and when I'm driving this fancy car, and when I have these jewelry or these clothes or whatever it is I want, materially, then I'm going to be happy. And it's ridiculous because, you all 34 years of interviews and 1,300 people. And I've asked all of them that question. Are you happier now than you're happier then? And the guy on Friday said, I was happy when I was living in a mobile home. Now I'm worth $500 million and I'm no happier. But I'm glad I did it because I've helped people and it's been great. And it's wonderful to have nice things. But am I technically any happier? And the answer is no. And of course, what makes people happier than family? Family and friends and love and caring, sharing with people, and all those wonderful things that money will never be able to buy.
I think you have to manifest that in your calendar. Like you have to have practices and scheduling time for, and you have to learn to say no to things and be okay with saying no to things. That successful people will always have more demands on their time than they have time. And it's okay to say no. I think getting back to the point of women struggling more emotionally with the growth of wealth or being with being wealth creators is that we feel obligated to say yes to everything. And as an entrepreneur, you have to closely guard your calendar. Have you found that to be true?
Oh, no question. You've got to learn to say. I think women struggle with this more than men. That might be maybe that's a sexist comment, but just based on doing seminars all over the world for the last 20 plus years. I think it's something called approval addiction. And I think women suffer for it more. And it's probably society that thrusts that upon women unfairly from birth, probably, that you guys have to carry the burden for everyone. And men somehow get off the we get a pass somehow with that. But I think for men and women, it's approval addiction. I'm afraid to say no to you because I am addicted to your approval. Even if I've never met you and I just meet you on a street corner and you ask me for whatever, some little thing, I'm addicted to approval of other people. And I don't feel good about myself unless I'm getting approved of. And if I say no to you, then you're going to disapprove of me at some level. And that makes me feel bad. So I think the key is learning to say no, but probably in a deeper level, psychological level, getting over the addiction to the approval of other people because their approval can't be as important to you as the approval you have for yourself. Otherwise, you're going to be compromised.
I like a quote by Seth Godin, and I may ruin it because I don't have it in front of me, but it was in the book about tribe building. And he said, if you're going to have people who are in the tribe, you have to be really clear about who's out of the tribe. And you can't have a tribe without there being people who don't fit in the tribe. And I think that goes well with what you're talking about. I like this term, approval addiction. It's like you have to choose the people whose approval you're going to seek, and then everyone else is a no. Like, you can think what you want of me, but but I'm doing my thing. You do yours.
Sure. And probably starts with our families and our spouses, or our significant others, or whatnot, our kids, our loved ones, our siblings, people that we really, that's a really good way to say it. I hadn't heard that quote, but I think you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. Or Seth Godin's right as well. Yeah.
So let's talk about magical thinking. You say avoid magical thinking. Can you give me a couple examples of a magical thinking?
Oh, the United States is, as I've worked all over the world for many years. We operate in about 10 countries on a daily basis. And the United States, as much as I love our country, we are the most magical thinking, emotionally immature country.
Really?
Well, sure. Because we're rich. We can get away with it. We're like a rich person that, always had money and they can buy their way out of problems. So we have these kind of like this. Well, if the universe will provide the money, it's going to fall from the sky. If I keep, thinking about it, if I keep praying about it, if I keep wishing for it, if I do all these things, somehow the universe is going to come and make me rich. And that's why we have all these people. We have a whole industry of people that think somehow, someday their ship's going to come in. and they're kidding themselves. The people that are rich people that are self-made go out and they fight for it, and it's nasty and it's messy and it's not pretty. It's not when you fight for it when you have zero. And these people, I think there's this whole law of attraction, which I like. Law of attraction, it's a nice concept. There's no proof there's absolutely no proof that it works. But I like the concept. I want to believe in the concept, but I don't base my finances on the concept. I go out and sell, and that's what self-made people do. And I think that there's a lot of people that are in this wishful thinking that somehow someday this is just going to happen because the universe or God or whoever's going to provide it for them, and they're living in a delusional fantasy. Let's do that. Someone's got to wake them up if they're going to be rich. So
another way of saying that is it's only actions that produce results. Thinking never produces results. Thinking can produce good actions, but thinking doesn't produce results.
Right. And if there's a universe or a God or whatever it is that you believe in, you think's going to help, well, go out and get it started. And then if there is a source, and I don't know if there is or not, but if there is, well, then let them help you a little bit. But go start it yourself, just in case they don't show up. Maybe they're busy somewhere doing a football game or something, and they can't help you. So go out and do it yourself and see. Maybe you get another break as you go along, but you're going to have to do most of it yourself.
All right. Just one more question for you today, Steve. You talk a lot about the things that you'll likely have to give up for wealth. So I would say that the idea of balance is one of those things. Can you talk a little bit about the opportunity cost of wealth and some of the people you've seen doing it most masterfully?
Yeah, this whole idea of balance is tough as an entrepreneur or someone seeking, self-made riches, that type of thing, because I think, you're imbalanced in the beginning because you're fighting so hard. And you don't have a lot of time for, I didn't spend a lot of time in my early adult years going to I went to parties. I had fun and everything, but not like most people. I wasn't hanging out on the weekends all the time doing that stuff. I was working and mostly failing most of the time, like most people do. And just an average person trying to build. So I think you give up time, you give up going on certain vacations or spending money, but your friends are blowing money they don't have and going into debt. You're saving money, trying to be conservative so you can invest it in your business. And so I think then you're working a lot, you're spending a lot of time, you're living way below your means if you're smart at all. And way below, where your friends are blowing money they don't have, you're saving every penny you have so you can invest it back in your business. But then you get rich, and then you have all the time in the world while everyone's still on the rat race trying to make ends meet. So it's heavy on the front end, but on the back end you can write your own ticket and do whatever you want.
It is really front loaded, isn't it? It's like. Yeah, it feels like a real grind sometimes, and it's hard to say no to parties and vacations and card games with friends. But then you sort of climb that mountain and you come to this place where you get to make strategic choices with your time. And it just is a feeling of, I don't know, consciousness, power with your life and your time. It's a good place to be.
And there are no guarantees you're going to make it. That's the thing, doubt creeps in. And I had so many failed businesses in the beginning that I thought I'm looking in the mirror thinking, maybe I just don't have it. Maybe I'm not smart enough or, technically, enabled enough or whatever to make these things happen. And you doubt it. And there's no guarantee you're ever going to make it if you sacrifice all these things. But you know what? You got a shot. And it's one of the only places in the world, as you know, Hilary, that a lot of people don't really realize when you travel over the world, you realize it's one of the only countries where you actually have a legitimate shot at self-made wealth. Most places you can't operate. The world doesn't look like the United States. We live in Disneyland. Most of the world's starving for food, and we're out there trying to get rich. Just because we're so fortunate to live here, it's just amazing.
It is a blessing that we get to be even in the inquiry. So you talk a lot about, I know I said only one more question, but you've mentioned your businesses many times in this interview. I thought you were an author. What kind of businesses are you in?
Well, we sell training contracts to billion-dollar companies like you mentioned before, Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble. So we help sales teams increase sales by millions of dollars a year, and we sell them training contracts. And so the books are about a lot of the training things that we have in our programs and that type of thing. And that's what we've been doing for about 20 years, all around the world.
All right, Steve, is there anything I haven't asked you about or anything you'd like to add?
I think just one thing, it's a good question. I appreciate you asking that. The one thing I think when people listen to these things, you hear people talking about making millions of dollars and, they're rich and all this kind of stuff. I think the one thing that I get more feedback about this than anything else is that people say, I feel intimidated, and I would say to people, So I've interviewed 1,300 self-made millionaires. It's maybe one, certainly the Wall Street Journal says it's the largest case study ever done. I didn't do it as a case study, of course, but it turned out to be a case study, I guess. But don't be intimidated. These people are no smarter than you are. Don't listen to this and think, oh my God, those people must be so smart. Believe me, they're not. They're no smart. No, there are a couple here and there, like I said. They're anomalies. They're not. Most people are just average people like us, like all of us, but they focus on money. And because they focus on money, they learn to understand it, and they understand the things around it, and they make some sacrifices and they get what they want. And everyone thinks they're a genius, and they're not geniuses. Most of them have failed their whole careers more than they got one home run, but they failed all the rest of the time, and everyone thinks they're a genius because they hit one home run. So you can do this. Don't be intimidated and think these people are better or smarter, because believe me, 34 years of experience, they're not.
That's an awesome and inspiring send-off. Thank you, Steve. It's really, honestly, a pleasure to finally meet you. Like I said, I've been quoting you for years, so you're already a friend of Profit Boss Radio, and I just really thank you for your time.
Hey, I appreciate it, Hilary, and thanks for doing this podcast, because it's really great you're doing it. You're a great host, and people need to hear these things. So I appreciate you being out there doing it.
It's my honor. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Today's episode of Profit Boss Radio was brought to you by Ignite Investing. If it's time to release all that financial anxiety and make sure you're on the right path to financial success by hiring a comprehensive wealth management team, and you have between $25,000 and $499,000 to invest, go to igniteinvesting.com now and click Get Started today. For today's show notes, visit hilaryhendershot.com. And if you love Profit Boss Radio, please share the show with your friends and, of course, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. Until next time, I wish you much prosperity.